Hello, my name is Camille and welcome to my channel, and boy do I have a treat for you today. 2 weeks ago I have uploaded a video here on YouTube about the curves adjustment and how it actually works in photo and video editing software. I explained all the science and all the math behind it, and I showed you how you can read this chart and reason about the image, whether it's about contrast or it's about brightening or darkening the image. So if you haven't watched this video, I can highly recommend you watch it right now. The link is up here and also in the description of this video. So at this point, I am assuming that you already know how the curves adjustment works. So in this video, I'm going to break down the brightness contrast adjustment layer in Photoshop. I am going to show you what exactly is this doing. And what we are going to do is we're going to be converting the brightness contrast adjustment into curves in a very clever way, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. And then we are going to reason about the curve that we get and to see whether the brightness contrast adjustment, what is actually doing. Are we clipping any highlights? Are we crushing any shadows? Are we brightening the image? Are we darkening the image? Where are we putting the contrast? Where are we taking away the contrast? So this is a super fun experiment to do and a super valuable knowledge, because after watching this video, you will be able to tell whether the brightness contrast adjustment is actually enough for your photo editing, or do you need to resort to something more powerful with more final control, like for instance the curves adjustment. So without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, so right here I have a Photoshop document that I will be presenting this technique on, and as we can see, the layer that is enabled right here is a linear gradient from left to right that is going from pure black to pure white. And if we want a brightness contrast adjustment, click right here and select brightness contrast. By sliding the brightness, we can brighten it. By sliding it to the left, we can darken it. And by sliding the contrast to the right, we are increasing the contrast. And sliding the contrast to the left, we are decreasing the contrast. Very basic stuff. You have probably used this adjustment layer a lot of times if you're editing photos in Photoshop. But have you ever stopped to wonder what this adjustment is actually doing to your image? Well, let's find out. So for instance, let's brighten the image by sliding the brightness slider to 50 to the right, like this. And we are ending up with a brighter image. And how to find out what is actually the curve that would do the exact same adjustment? Well, if you remember from my previous video, what the curves chart actually mean is that on the x-axis, we are having the brightness level of the input image, and then on the y-axis, we are having the brightness level of the output image. So it's essentially a function, it's a mathematical function which takes the arguments on the x-axis and projects them on the values of this function on the y-axis. So what we can actually do is we can scan all the pixels of this image before the brightness contrast adjustment, and this will be our input to this transformation, and then apply the brightness contrast and compare how the values of each individual pixel in the entire image is transforming. These will be the values of our transformation, and then we can take those points and feed it into the curves adjustment to plot the entire curves graph. And of course, we are not going to do it by hand because this would be insanely tedious. So what's actually super fun about Photoshop is that it is actually possible to write scripts for Adobe Photoshop so that the script would take care of the heavy lifting. I don't know if you know this about me, but I am actually a web developer professional, so JavaScript, which is the main web development language, is like a piece of cake to me. And as it turns out, it is actually possible to write scripts for Photoshop right in JavaScript. So what I did is I implemented a script. I can show you right here, but this is going to be just a brief presentation. I'm not going to go too deep into this script because this is not what this video is about. But basically the script is, like I told you, it is turning off the brightness contrast, scanning the entire image, saving it in the memory, then it turns on the brightness contrast adjustment, scans the image again, and then compares the two, and then uses that information to feed the control points into the curves adjustment. And the curves adjustment actually supports up to 16 control points, so we are taking all the pixels from our image and then we are selecting those 16 that are kind of evenly spread out to get the best approximation of the curve. So let's actually perform some tests and let's see what we get. So the way to access scripts in Photoshop, if you have them installed, is to go to File, Scripts, and then select a script. My script is called Convert to Curves. So if our brightness contrast is selected right here, and we have some adjustments right here, for instance, here we have 50 brightness and 0 contrast, we click on Convert to Curves, we wait like a second, 2, or maybe 5, and then we are presented with the result. And as you can see, the curve looks like a convex curve, you know, the convex if you are watching from the top, which means that indeed we are brightening the image, because for every point on the curve, like I told you on the video from 2 weeks ago, for every point on the curve that is above this diagonal right here, everything that is above it is brighter than the original image. So pretty much every tone is getting brighter except for the pure white and pure black. So we are not clipping any highlights, we are not crushing any shadows. We are brightening everything, and the most contrast we are having right here around midtones, and the least contrast we are having in the extreme highlights, because again, when the curve is steeper than 45 degrees, the contrast is being added to the image in this tonal range. If the local steepness of the curve is below 45 degrees, like for instance right here around these tones, we are taking away the contrast. Pretty cool, huh? So let's see what happens if we actually, instead of brightening the image, let's add some contrast in the brightness contrast and convert it into the curve, and let's see what kind of curve do we get. So let's delete this. Let's input here 0, and then let's pump up the contrast all the way to 100. This is how it looks after the adjustment, before the adjustment. So let's convert it to curves. Again, File, Scripts, Convert to Curves. And what do you expect will happen? Well, we will be presented with some kind of an S-curve, like I explained on the video from 2 weeks ago. We will be darkening some shadows and we will be brightening some highlights. So let's see the result of this algorithm. So as I predicted, we are presented with an S-curve. We are crossing the diagonal right here around the midtones. So we are darkening the shadows, we are keeping the midtones as they were, and we are brightening the highlights. Exactly what I expected to happen. And this is what happens if we are adding contrast to the brightness contrast adjustment. But we have added the maximum amount of contrast that we could in the brightness contrast adjustment, and as you can see, this curve is not very extreme, it's pretty mild. So what that means is that the brightness contrast adjustment is actually not very strong in adjusting contrast. If you need to add more contrast, you will have to resort to curves and make the curve more steep around midtones. Also, what is awesome about this script that I have created is that, for instance, you can start with brightness contrast adjustment, you can do some preliminary adjustments to your image, then you can convert it to curves, you can get rid of the brightness contrast adjustment, and then continue with curves and do some more fine-tuning. And you can actually download my script that converts brightness contrast adjustment into the curves adjustment for completely free, no strings attached. You don't even need to subscribe to my channel, although I would definitely appreciate if you did. Just head over to the description of this video. There will be 2 links. One link would be to the text file of this script that you can install in your Photoshop. And then the second file is going to be a README where I basically explain how to install this, so it will show up in this context menu that I have shown. So you can use this yourself, you can use this on any image. It doesn't work only on the gradient, it works on any image. And let me actually present you what kind of result would we get if we did it on an actual photograph. Well, let's disable that for now. Let's disable the gradient and let's enable this beautiful image of the Skogafoss waterfall that I have taken in Iceland. And now let's enable back the brightness contrast and let's run the script on this image, not on the gradient, but on the photograph. So let's go to File, Scripts, and again, Convert to Curves. And as you can see, we are presented with a very similar curve. If we actually click here and here, we can see that the control points are a little bit different because again, the control points are derived strictly from the image we are operating on. So if we are operating the script on this gradient, we got this control points, and if we are operating on the photograph, we got this control points. But look at that, the shape of the actual curve is pretty much identical. So as a last example, let's see what kind of curve would we get if we brighten the image and also increase the contrast. Let's go back to the gradient. And now we are leaving the contrast at 100, but we are adding 20 of brightness. And then let's run the script again. And what kind of curve could you expect? Well, it definitely will be shaped like an S-curve because we need to add the contrast. It also needs to have more of the tones above this diagonal than below because we are going to brighten the image overall. So what kind of curve could we expect? Well, it will be an S-curve that is slightly above the diagonal. Let's see what's the exact result of our script in this case. So as I have predicted, we see an S-curve right here, but it doesn't cross exactly in the middle here, this diagonal. It crosses it somewhere in the shadowy area. So more of the curve is above the diagonal, which means that the overall image is getting brighter. And some part of the image, some part of the shadows lies below the diagonal because we want to add the contrast. So we are adding the contrast and also brightening the image, exactly what the brightness contrast adjustment was supposed to do. Brighten and add contrast. So now you know exactly what kind of adjustments is the brightness contrast doing to our image. As you saw, it's not very strong. For instance, if I add the maximum amount of contrast that I can add in the brightness contrast adjustment, the curve that this adjustment is actually producing is not very extreme. So if you need more extreme adjustments in the contrast, you definitely need to resort to curves. But like I said, you can download my script, you can work with brightness contrast that is familiar to you. And then if you need to do some more fine-tuned adjustment or maybe more extreme adjustments, you can convert it to curves. You can get rid of the brightness contrast and work with the curve from that point on. Super useful. I can highly encourage you to at least play around with this. And by the way, let me know what kind of other adjustment would you like me to break down and convert to curves and see what kind of curve would we get. I'm thinking about maybe color balance or HSL. This should be pretty fun because we would have to work with R, G, and B curves separately, the channel curves and not only the luminance curves. So this should be pretty interesting. Let me know down below in the comments which adjustment layer would you like me to break down, convert to curves, and see what we find out. This is definitely a very fun thing for me to do. Alright, that's basically it for me for this video. If you found it helpful, make sure to smack that like button down below. It really helps me out. Also, like I said, consider subscribing to the channel because there will be more videos like this coming up. And also I make all sorts of photography and filmmaking tutorials here on YouTube. Basically everything revolves around things you can do with your camera. So if any of that is up your alley, definitely consider subscribing. I upload pretty much new videos every single week. But like I said, that's it for now. See you next time, hopefully. Have a good day and bye-bye.